Todd Nesloney. Now, y'all know all the good people that I get to come to RESA, I find on the Twitter. Yes, the Twitter. Well, I have seen some of Todd's works and some of his clips on the Twitter, and he has a lot of energy, and you know, it's very important to me at RESA for us not to just bring people who can write a book. I appreciate that. I was an old English teacher. But we love people who have been practitioners and who have been in the trenches doing the work, and they have the heart for the work, and Todd does indeed have that. So, with no further ado, oh, and he has twins, and they're precious. So y'all need to follow him on Twitter so you can see the face. Okay. Come on up, Todd, and share with us.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be spending the next couple of hours with you as we dive into a bunch of things. So thank you so much for choosing to be here. I know no matter what your role is in education, getting out of the classroom is easy and difficult at the same time. It's easy to leave your building because you need a break from them, but it's hard because they need you 1,000 different times while you're gone. It just feels like an ad. So thank you so much for pouring into yourselves today and choosing to be here. And for those who are watching the recording as well, taking the time to watch it today as well. My name is Todd Nesloney, and I'm still learning too, is that every time I hear the word Twitter, I'm like, God, that's what it used to be. Now it's this stupid thing called X, which makes no sense at all. I'm very active on social media. I do a bunch. I started as an instructional aide who became a teacher, who became a principal, and now I work as the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership for the Texas Elementary Principals and Supervisors Association. I'm also organizer of a conference series called Get Your Lead On that happens across the country. Actually, we have one in Atlanta coming in February, I believe. But we do a bunch of those kind of things as well, and I do this kind of stuff. I speak and get to pour into people all the time. But anytime I come into any presentation, I always kind of like to start with letting people get to know me, the person, before we dive into the work stuff. Because sometimes we can solely define ourselves as an educator or someone who works at a school, and the reality is, no matter how much you want to try, that is still a job. It is not who we are at our core. And so I have to start by introducing my family. That's my wife, Liz, and those are my twin boys, Liam and Brixton. They are 2 years and 4 months old, and they have been in their terrible twos for a little over a year now. It has been quite the journey. Anytime I leave, even for this trip, which is just, I'm not even gone 24 hours from home. And I've already got like 15 texts. And when are you coming back? When's the flight? Things are crazy because the boys are full energy all the time. I never knew it was impossible to wear out some children, but my son Brixton is impossible to wear out. He sleeps great at night, but during the day there is no slowing down. And they just started speaking in full sentences, so I've learned quickly how annoying that is when they do that, and they've just started copying everything that you say and remembering things from weeks ago. So I'm learning all these things I heard parents talk about that I never knew was true until I became a parent. I was like, wow, all of this is true. But the reason I start with them is because they are who I am at my core. They affect every decision that I make, and they're a part of my story. My wife and I have been married for a little over 11 years this past April, and we have always both worked in education. I've shared with you some of my roles, and she was a preschool teacher at a private school for many years. And both of us have loved being in education, but we think there's two types of educators. There's educator A, who is like, I love going into work every single day because I want to be a parent and I'm seeing all the things I'm going to do differently when I become a parent. Then there's educator B, who says, I love going into work every day because it's the best free birth control out there. Now for us, we were both in the A category. We couldn't wait to start our own family, and we were super excited when we got married for that to be part of our journey. And for the first 8.5 years of our marriage, it never happened. And when the world stopped and you were no longer able to run from difficult conversations because you were quarantined to your home, my wife looked at me a few months in and said, I want to talk to somebody. I want to figure out why we're not getting pregnant. We went and met with a fertility doctor who told us, I'm sorry, your wife has what's called a low AMH, which is a low egg reserve. He said, I can work with you, but you're looking at about a 1 to 4% success rate. So what do you want to do? Now, my wife and I are both of the personality where, like, if there's like a 0.001% of something and we don't try, we'll forever convince ourselves we could have been part of that. And so we said, okay, let's at least try it. So we began the infertility journey, and when we did, we told absolutely no one. We didn't tell any of our friends. We didn't tell any of our family, because the moment we left that appointment, we felt broken. We felt like there was something wrong with us. Because we're raised in a society that tells you, don't have sex, you're going to get pregnant. Make sure you're on birth control, you're going to get pregnant. Don't do this or you're going to get pregnant. And we both worked at schools where there were mamas who walked by a man and got pregnant with their next kid, and we couldn't even have one. And so we had that mindset of, we can't tell anybody because something's different or wrong or broken about us, and it's not normal. And when we began the journey, we knew about the pills and the shots and the diet change. What we didn't realize was at the end of every month, you don't go take a pregnancy test. You go take a blood test, because that's the fastest way to determine pregnancy. You take the blood test at 8 a.m., and they don't give you results till like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's some random stranger who calls and either says, congratulations, you're pregnant, or I'm sorry, you're not. And so after month and month and month of the treatments, my wife looked at me and said, I'm done. She said, I could do the pills, the shots, and the diet change all day long. She said, but what I can't do is spend an entire month holding on to every ounce of hope, only to have a stranger call me and take it away in seconds. She said, so we'll do it one more month, and then maybe it's foster care. Maybe it's adoption. Maybe something else is meant to be in our path, and I have to be okay with that. And I said, I will do whatever you want to do. So we did it one more month. We did the test. We got the phone call, and the nurse said, you're pregnant. And we screamed and we cried and we did the number one thing they told us not to do. We called everybody in our family that day and told them we were pregnant. And the nurse was like, it's too early. And we said, too early? We've been waiting 9 years to get here? This is not too early. We're telling everybody about this. And then we thought pregnancy was going to be like Instagram, where the mom is always smiling, everything's so happy, it's such a joyous journey. And being pregnant was a joyous journey, but it was also the most stressful 9 months of our life. Because when you've struggled getting pregnant and you finally do, it's exciting and it's happy, but it's also debilitating. The fear of, if something happens, will I ever get pregnant again? The boys arrived months later, and I will never forget the first ultrasound that we went to where the nurse said, there's 2. And I said, 2 what? And she said, 2 heartbeats. And I said, wow, what does that mean? And she said, twins. And I said, we're going to die. And the doctor came in and said, I need y'all to breathe. He said, I need you both to understand that this should not have happened. He said, you shouldn't have been able to get pregnant, but somehow you did, and I need you both to live in the miracle. Now, people often ask me, when you begin presentations, Todd, why is this the story you start with? Where does this tie in? How does this fit with what you're going to be talking about to educators? And there's several reasons I share this story as we begin our work today. And the first is this. I have to model for you what your biggest superpower is. And that is vulnerability. Vulnerability is not easy. It is terrifying every time, but it is how you break through hardened hearts. It is how you allow those that you lead to see that you don't always have it all together, that you don't always have all the answers, and that's okay. The other reason I tell this story is my wife said, I want this out there. She said, because I know that there's someone else in that room that needs to hear that their pain matters. In the United States of America, 43% of women struggle with fertility. And in a field that is predominantly female, when you don't talk about these things, you stigmatize them. You make people feel othered, and you make them hold them in, which is why we never told our story when we were going through it. And after going through it and sharing our story across the world now, we've learned the countless individuals who have also had some kind of journey that can relate to what we went through. And how if we had just talked about it when we were going through it, we wouldn't have walked it alone. And it made such a difference. When I asked her for permission to share this story, she said, I need you to make sure you share one particular piece from my side. And I said, what is that? And she said, tell them that I loved my job as a preschool teacher, because I knew every day someone would tell me I was pretty. She said, but I hated the first 5 minutes of every single workday. I would wake up in dread. I did not want to go on campus. And she said, because when you walk through those doors, in those first 5 minutes, all you see is what you can't have yourself. and then they hug you, they tell you they love you, they're so happy you're there, that it washes away enough pain that you can be who they need you to be. She said, but people don't talk about those first 5 minutes. And so that's why I start this today, because I could talk about the educator stuff all day long and give you all these ideas and resources, but the reality is if we don't talk about who we are as people, none of that's going to matter. Because when I wrote my first book, Kids Deserve It, and it took off, and I'm still so proud of the success and everything that's come from that book, there's one chapter in that book that I absolutely hate. And I begged my publisher to take it out, but my co-author loves the chapter, so we leave it in, and I don't have a choice. So I just talk about it now in my presentations. But it's a chapter called Leave It in Your Car. And we wrote about how, as educators, we got to leave our mess in our car and bring our best for our students every single day. And that sounds great as a soundbite. It makes a great graphic to share in an email or social media. But the reality is, it is the dumbest advice anybody could give. Because if I just found out I have a terminal illness, I can't leave that in my car. If I just lost someone I love, if my significant other just lost their job, if I had a flat tire that morning, I can't always just leave that in the car. Now, that's not saying you come to work and cry all day long and you can't get your job done. No, there's a line here. Your work does not become your therapy session. But what I'm saying is we have to stop acting like, since we're an educator and we have that title, whether that's principal, assistant principal, aide, whatever your role is in education, you're all an educator, that you have to always be put together. You have to allow people to walk the journey with you. Because when they don't know what you're going through, they don't know why you are acting the way you are, why you may be a little bit more on edge, why things may be bothering you more than normal. And people have far more empathy when they know some of the stuff you're going through, even if you don't want to share all of it. Even if you just share, it has been a really rough time in my life right now, I'm sorry, can you help me just kind of do this, this, and this? Because who we are outside of work plays into every single decision. Going through this process, every single day played into how I led, played into decisions I made, how I reacted to others. And so we can't talk about all the education stuff without first talking about the people stuff. Which is why in our work today, we're starting with me talking about your leadership blueprint. Me talking about you as a leader before we move into the culture building ideas and all the resources and everything like that. So today, our flow of the day is going to be where first we focus on ourselves. We focus on how are we making sure we're the best version of us so that others get the best version of us. And then that moves into, okay, now that I got myself down, how do I make the culture better? How do I make people feel valued? How do I increase engagement? All that kind of stuff is going to come. So that by the end of the day, you're going to leave with at least 20 or 30 ideas. Now, I say that, but let me remind you what research shows. Anytime you attend PD, your goal is to walk away with 1 to 3 ideas and no more. You can take notes over as many as you want, but don't go back to your campus expecting to do 5 of these ideas or 6, because they will all fail, everybody will hate you, and then you will resent this training. And so I'm telling you now, this is not my personal opinion, this is what research shows. Professional development is meant for 1 or 2 ideas. Perfect those, then you can bring in additional ones. But sometimes as leaders, even the best intentions and decisions don't equate success. And so it's you identifying where your biggest needs are, whether that's you personally or where you work, and then moving from there. So I'd love to know, just real quick before we begin, name what your daily role in education is and how long you've been in education. We'll start right here. There's some knowledge in here. Well, hopefully I can add to your tool belt today to give you some more things. We're also going to have some opportunities for you to be sharing with those around you, and I encourage you to really focus on the things you're already doing. Because I think one of the things we forget sometimes in education is the amount of things that we are doing that others are not. You being here today already shows you a notch above of a lot of other leaders in our field. And I say that because there's a lot of educators who never leave their campus because they can't, is what they say. So they never grow, they never focus on their growth. And we all know a webinar is great, but COVID ruined the greatness, and it's really not as great anymore because everybody's over the webinars. And so though those have value in some areas, the real value is when you can sit and talk to other people who are doing the work to know, what are you doing? And sometimes we can minimize the work that we're doing and saying, oh, well, everybody does this. And I will tell you, I was guilty of that as well. And what I learned by visiting schools and districts all across the United States of America, you are not the norm. There are a lot of people not doing what you claim is normal. And so one of the things I constantly share with others is share even the most basic thing that you do that you find successful. Because for somebody else, that may be a huge need for them that they never thought of. How many times have you attended a PD, got lots of great ideas, went back and implemented something, and then forgot everything else at the PD, and then years later somebody brings something up and you're like, wait, I remember, yeah, so-and-so's, I need to start doing that. I totally forgot about that. Because we can't take in all of the stuff. And that's why I always share, because you might be sharing something somebody heard years ago and forgot about, and now they can reuse. So don't ever minimize your work. And so today I want you to remember that as we have time to share that as well. So as we talk about authentic leadership this morning in your blueprint, I want to first think about, why does this authentic leadership matter? It's exactly why my co-author Tyler Cook and I wrote the book, Building Authenticity. The book came out a couple months ago, and we wrote it because I've seen a bunch of leadership stuff. I love John Maxwell. He's one of my idols. I love the work that he does. I love Brene Brown. I think they are brilliant in the things that they do. I've gotten to meet John Maxwell. I was actually recognized by him for some work. And I'm so impressed by what they can do. But sometimes what I find is when we talk about this word leadership, we always go back to work. How are you leading at work? How are the best and how are you leading your people? And the reality is, leadership is not and should not solely be defined by your career choice or by your job title. You lead at your job, no matter what your job is, because eyes are watching you and ears are listening to you. You lead when you go home, no matter who's at your home or in your family. And you lead when you go out with your friends, and they are learning from you even if they don't say it. When we talk about the word leader today, I want you to consider that word in the terms of every aspect of your life. As we talk about some of these, I'm going to talk about the professional side of things on some, but also to think, how does that apply when I go home? How does that apply when I go to the next family reunion, or the next Christmas, or whatever future therapy session I'm going to need after spending time with my family? How do I know, how does that apply when I go with my friends, or when I choose not to go out with my friends because other stuff has worn me down too much? So all of that applies. So we're going to do a lot of focus on ourselves right now, because our people need us to be our authentic selves, which is why I call this authentic leadership. Because I don't know about you, but guessing by the years that are in this room, I'm sure you've worked under somebody who was not very authentically leading, who may have acted one way in front of a group when they're speaking, and then they call you into a meeting and they're a totally different person. We've all seen those types of things. And the one thing I always look at, and one of the best things that ever happened to me was when I started attending therapy. I wished I had started attending therapy when I was a principal, because it would have made my job totally different. I started a few years ago because I went to a professional development training for educators, and one of the guys was a mental health speaker. And he said, how many times a year are you supposed to go to the dentist? And we're like, well, you're supposed to go twice a year. And he said, what are they for? And we were like, well, to check up, to make sure everything's going, you don't have any issues arising. He said, okay, when you have a kid, why do you take them to their 1 week appointment, and their month appointment, and their 6 month appointment, and their year? Why do you take them to those? And we're like, well, to check up. He goes, okay, so nothing's wrong with your kid when you're taking them to those appointments, right? Nothing's wrong with your teeth when you're going to the dentist, right? So why do we feel like when we schedule a therapy or a counseling appointment, something has to be wrong with you for that appointment? Why do we do all this prerequisite work to make sure nothing's wrong with our teeth, so nothing doesn't happen further down the line? Everything's moving right with our kids, so nothing's off there. But yet our mental health is totally different. Our mental health, well, you don't need to go see somebody until something's wrong. He said we shouldn't be acting like that. In fact, your mental health is the most important piece of who you are. He said, so my advice is every single person in this room should have at least 2 appointments a year with a therapist. Be just like a dentist. Just go twice a year for a checkup, have some time to talk to somebody, and move on. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I was raised in a family where if you were going, it's because something was wrong. So I never thought about it that way. And I thought, okay, so I went to my wife and I said, hey, I'm going to go see a therapist. And she said, what's wrong? And I said, I knew you were going to say it. I said, I went to a PD, they talked about all this. She goes, but you promise nothing's wrong? And I was like, actually, everything in life's really great right now, so now's the perfect time to see a therapist to see if they really know what they're talking about. I said, yeah, I found this one, not in our town. I'm not seeing nobody in our town. I'm going to see them at Walmart after I've talked to them in the room. I said, so I'm going to be driving over to this other town, and I wanted to find a Christian counselor because I wanted to have a little bit of my faith mixed in there, and I wanted to see how that played into the counseling. So I drive 45 minutes once a week to go see a counselor. And it has been life-changing. And I have not had any major thing happen in my life that has been traumatizing since seeing a therapist, so I don't know how that's going to work when we get to that. But the amount of things that I've been able to dive into and understand about myself that I never did before would have changed my job completely. And I would have been such a better leader had I been taking care of my mental health. To see the way I reacted to people, and it wasn't their fault, it was my fault. To see how I'm thinking about things, how I'm letting old habits take over the way I react to situations. Because I will tell you, one of the biggest things my therapist taught me was I was talking about, I said something and I said, but I can't really say that because they have it worse. And I don't want to make them feel bad. And he said, I'm going to tell you something right now that I don't want you to ever forget. And I said, what is that? And he said, don't you ever minimize your pain because you think somebody else might have it worse. Might they have it worse? Yeah. But that doesn't mean you matter less because they have it worse. He said, you matter too. And the other big lesson I've learned through therapy is I can't fix anyone but me. And I had this complex where, well, if I can just help them see this better way, if I can convince them this isn't right, if I can show them this. And he was like, no, you are never going to change somebody, and nor should that be your goal. If that is an issue you have with them, you change yourself and watch them change along the way. Because I brought that up with something that was going on with my wife, and I was like, well, I don't know how to fix this. And he said, why are you worried about that? That's her, that's not you. You focus on this side of you who has a problem with that. And I guarantee you, when you fix that side of you, you'll see something change in your wife too, and you won't ever have to have anything else happen. And I did that, and I was like, whoa, it actually works. Because my therapist calls me an arguer, because anytime we're in our appointment, I'm like, well, what about this? Well, I don't think it's going to work as this. Well, what about this? And he'll be like, just try it, and then come back next week and tell me if it works. And every time I come back, it worked, because he's the professional and I'm not. But I say all that to tell you, you have to be taking care of your mental health. Is it hard to make time to go see a therapist? Yes. That's why so many educators have so many sicknesses that don't get dealt with. Because we don't take off work to go to appointments. Because just one more thing we got to take off for. And then we pay for it in the long run when we have these severe issues that arise. Is therapy usually covered by insurance? No. So it is a financial investment on my side as well. And I'm now driving somewhere out of my town, because I don't want to work with somebody in my town, and that's my choice. But they also have all these virtual therapy sessions and things like that. So there's so many ways to make it happen. But I talk about this because I can't express enough how much therapy was life-changing for me, and how I've become a better husband, a better friend, and a better educator since starting that. And when I don't go for a few weeks because life gets busy, I can tell that I need to call and schedule an appointment because I need somebody who is not in my day-to-day life to lay truth into me when they hear me talk. Because one of the biggest things too, my third biggest thing that I've learned in therapy is that I have a lot of negative self-talk that if I don't keep it in check, it takes over the way I view myself and others. Because I can't tell you how many times in therapy my therapist said, let me repeat back to you what you said, how you described that person, the 3 words you used. And then he'd repeat back and I'm like, whoa, okay, sounds a little different coming out of your mouth. Did I really say that? And he was like, yes. And you've said it like 4 times now in this session. And I was like, okay, I need to be thinking about how my perspective works. So that's why this work matters, because people don't follow a faker very long. They definitely don't respect them. And we don't work hard for people we don't like. We can talk about it from the kids' perspective all day long. We say, kids don't work hard for teachers they don't like. Guess what? I don't work hard for a superintendent I don't like. I don't work hard for a principal if I'm an assistant principal that I don't like. I don't work hard as a teacher if that principal, I want to stab them in the eye every time I see them. So we have to be thinking about how our leadership is affecting others, because if we are saying, well, I just need to get them over the hump, I'm afraid, that's all in your leadership, how you're leading. So as we dive into this, I want you to think about and talk with the people at your table. Think about the last year. How have you led in this last year? Is there something that happened that you would have done differently? And do you feel that you have been able to stay true to who you desire to be? Because I don't know about you, a lot of times it's like, well, things I would do differently are things that did not line up with who I desire to be. Because we're not always, we never get to a finish line in self-growth. It's always about who we're trying to be better, how we're trying to do that. So have a little bit of an open conversation now with those around you. Talk about what you would have done differently this year and how things may have worked out as your leadership has happened. Go. Now, normally I would ask somebody in the room to feel brave enough to share, but because this is being recorded, I don't want you to have to get personal in a recording. So what I will say is as we do this, usually things that I hear about are people say things like, well, there was an issue with a staff member that I didn't handle as well as I could have, or a parent, or a student. Or there's somebody who says, well, you know, I didn't follow through on something I said I would follow through on, and I regret not being able to do that. I let these other things take place. Or sometimes people say, well, you know, I just don't know how to tell people I don't have time for that. Or no, or that's not a good idea, and I let them do it, and then it failed. And I knew it was going to fail, but I didn't want to hurt their feelings. Like, there's all these things that come up as leaders. And I want you to know that nothing in here is a unique issue. No mistake you make will you ever be the first person who's made that mistake in your life or in that other person's life. And sometimes we can convince ourselves that, oh, well, nobody else made this mistake. I must not be doing it right. You clearly ain't worked with other people long enough because we make mistakes all day long. Some of you probably made a mistake this morning when you left your house and said something you didn't like to your kids or to your spouse or to somebody else. Or you ignored an email that you just don't want to respond to that person because you don't like them. Whatever it is, there's all those things that happen. But I want you to be thinking about, throughout the day, I may have some other times for you to turn and talk, and it's okay to get that a little bit vulnerable because it is scary, it is uncomfortable, but I am of the belief that we are not learning until we are uncomfortable. So if at some point today you aren't uncomfortable, then I didn't do my job. You wasted your time coming because you didn't learn anything. So I hope sometime today that you're just like, oh, this makes me feel a little iffy, oh, that's a stupid idea, I'm never doing it. Great, all those things are great. All those things are normal. So, when we talk about our leadership, we have to understand that our leadership doesn't start outwardly. It starts inward. How are we growing ourselves each and every day? And I want you to think about the professional development that you've attended or been a part of in the last year. How many of those professional learning opportunities dealt with you? Dealt with an issue you have as a person, not tied into your role as a career. Because sometimes all the PD we go to is, well, I need more literacy ideas. Well, I need difficult conversations. Well, I need parent-teacher meetings. I need to make sure we're following the laws. Because as an administrator or as any type of role, there's so many things the state expects of you that thinks that you aren't doing anything else during the day, that you can do their list all day long and nothing else. And sometimes that means we don't ever focus on what training we've attended ourselves. One of the things that I reflect on is, okay, look at those last 3 months of my life. Did I do anything that grew me? If I didn't do anything that grew me, I'm missing the biggest piece of professional growth. Because when it comes to growth, I have to be growing myself, not just whatever lines into that career. Because if you move to a different role in education, a lot of that PD may no longer apply, but you still apply because you're still there. Now, that is difficult because it takes more time, but where we place our time is what we value. And one of the things that I have to often tell people, and I have to remind myself, is the worst phrase you can use is, I don't have time for that. Because that phrase is a lie. We always have time for what we make time for. You did not have time to be here today, but you chose to be here, or forced to, one of the two. And so for others, it's like, you know, the one thing I've learned how to say is, I don't say I didn't have time for that. I say, I'm so sorry, other things that I put more value in took up my time right now. Because that's the truth. There were other things that were more important that I need to take care of right now. It's not that I didn't have time for you. I did, but there were other things that were more valuable for me to focus on right now. Because that's the truth. That's me owning my choice. When you say, oh, I didn't have time for it, that's like, oh, it's not my fault. All these other things happened. No, it is your fault. You make time for what you want to make time for. And so that also leads me into saying, you make time for what you want to make time for. As a leader, one of the worst things you can say to your people that you lead is, oh my gosh, it was so busy today, I didn't have time for lunch. And so many times we wear that as a badge of honor. And when you say things like, I didn't even have time for lunch today, what your people you are leading hear you say is, you don't take care of yourself, so how are you supposed to take care of me? Because we always go back to ourselves. That's human nature to be selfish in the end in some pieces. So if you can't even take time to take care of yourself at lunch, you really want me to believe that you're going to be able to take care of me in difficult moments? Now, does that mean you have time for a full 30-minute lunch every day? I mean, have you worked in education very long? You know we don't have time for that every day. So maybe some days it's a 5-minute lunch. Maybe it's a walking lunch to where I'm going next. But I'm still taking care of my mind and body so that I can be who others need me to be. One of the best things I learned as principal is that you cannot close your door and expect to not be bothered. You cannot lock your door and expect, you cannot turn the light off. You cannot put a sign on the door that says, I'm meeting with the superintendent, I'm getting fired, please don't interrupt. They will still interrupt you with the same question, which is always, do you have a minute?
Yes.
And your answer is always a lie, because you always tell them, yeah, what's going on? You don't have a minute, but you always tell them yes. So what I had to do as a principal was when I needed that 5-minute lunch, I would meet with my secretary, and she would go and stand in front of my closed office door while I ate. So that way when someone came up, because inevitably they always do, she could say, he's busy, go. Well, I just need, no, go away. Because she had to be there to guard my time, so that in that 5 minutes with the lights off, with slow music going, while I'm just eating as fast as I can at least refuel enough that when I come out, I'm better for the people I serve. Even though it was just a 5-minute break. Because sometimes that's all we need. So it's just like, if you've been in this field long enough, sometimes we just need a 5-minute cry. Or we just need to go scream something out somewhere, and we can just let it out and then go, okay, I'm good now. Now I can be what I need to be until I go home, and then I'll say it all again. And so we have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself in those moments. Because the things that we are focusing on in our lives are the things that we are empowering in our lives.
Right.
This was a lesson, again, I learned through therapy. Because I learned that I have to do a weekly self-evaluation of what I'm thinking about and talking about. Because if I'm not doing that inventory every single week, I miss stuff. So what does that mean? It means every Friday I sit down and go, okay, what did I spend a lot of time talking about this week? Okay, this was an issue, this was an, okay, here, okay, and what were some of the things that were coming out of my mouth? What was I thinking about? Oh my God, Miss Jones, I'm talking about her every day this week because she's not getting anything done, whatever. And I realized all of these thoughts and words that have been prioritizing my time are negative. And then it takes over. And so for me, that inventory has allowed me to know when I need to do some shifts. When I need to start talking about someone with different words. When I need to start thinking about things differently, spending my time in a little different zone. And I have to do that weekly. You may need to do it daily to start. You may be able to find, you may be like, I'm a positive person, I can just do this once a month. Okay, that's great. I'm just giving you starter points here. But I have to think about, what am I focusing on? Because all of my focus is what I'm empowering in every area of my life. But also learning how, even through that empowerment, I have to be able to disconnect. If you're anything like me, you're not good at this. We've been conditioned as educators and as educational leaders that if we aren't answering an email, a text, or an in-person question, we aren't doing our job very well. And I've learned very quickly that I have to disconnect. And there's several ways that I do this. The first of all, my email app on my phone is deleted off my phone at 7 p.m. every single night. Because no good email comes after 7 p.m. And my issue is, my personality is, when I see a little red number in the corner of an app, I've got to check it. Like, I've got to make it go away. I got to know. If I hear a ding that something came in, I got to, who sent it? What they say? What's going on? Like, that's just how my personality is. And so very quickly I realized, oh my gosh, even though I had the best intentions of, okay, I'm not going to check my phone after 7. When I go down for bed, as I'm setting my alarm, I may go, oh, there's an email that came in. What does it say real quick? And I read it, and guess what? Then I get no sleep that night. because I'm obsessively worrying about an issue that can't even be solved until the next day. But because I read it, I didn't get any sleep, I stressed, and when I deal with that issue the next day, I don't deal with it well. Because I didn't get my sleep. I didn't get that time to rejuvenate. So deleting my email, because if you're worried about, well, what if I miss a really important email overnight? Let me tell you, if somebody got something important to say, they are not going to email it to you. They're going to text you, they're going to call you, or they're going to come knocking at your door or be at your office before you even get there. You don't have to worry about missing something important. This was what I had to do to take care of myself. And it changed everything. The second thing that I started doing was looking at my teachers' contracted hours. If their contracted hours ended at 4 p.m., I never sent an email after 4 p.m. I never sent an email on the weekend because I wanted them to know I value your time away. And you may think, God, Todd, it was just an email at 5:30. What's the big deal? If they don't want to check it, they don't have to check it. Well, guess what? That means you don't really know your people. Because all of you work with someone who's a people pleaser. Who they will be in the middle of a family dinner where their sister just announced they were pregnant and they're celebrating, and they'll hear that ding and go, oh, it's an email from my principal, I gotta read it real quick. Oh, she needs to know this, but I should not do it until 10 o'clock tomorrow, but I'm gonna go send it right now. Because they don't want you to think that you're not prioritizing them, or that they're not doing what they need to do to make you happy, or anything like that. I know that all of you use an email system that has a send later, or a schedule send button. So I write my email sometimes at 7 o'clock at night if I'm still working into the evening hours. I'm not telling you can't work after work, but I schedule it to go out as soon as that teacher's contracted hours begin the next day. So that they can know that during your time away, I want you to be away. I want you to go with friends or family, or just go on the couch with Netflix. I don't care, but I want you to value your time away. Because we also send the messaging that your brain should always be on teaching. If I send an email, check it. If the parents are emailing you, call them back. Check them. Do whatever you need to do. But we gotta keep going. Well, then your brain never gets to turn off. And that's why we see people burning out left and right. Now, there's a long list of reasons why educators are burning out left and right, but that's another one of them, is that we haven't prioritized ourselves and our time away. The other thing I started doing is I started realizing as a principal, and when I became a leader, it's really hard to take the weekends off. Because all I do is see the long list of stuff I have to do. And every time I take time away, I know that to-do list is never going to be finished, but I just feel it getting longer and longer, and it stresses me out. And so I spent a lot of my first years as principal working on the weekends and doing all that time, thinking I'm getting ahead so things will be easier during the week. Though I might have gotten a little bit ahead at work, I was less ahead with my family and friends. I wasn't going out with friends because I got home too exhausted. I wasn't having the type of family relationships that I needed to have because I was having work be the priority. And so for me, I couldn't take every weekend off because that was like too much anxiety for me to never get those work done on some of them. But I took every other Saturday off to start. Say, okay, this Saturday, nope, you're right. I'll put my phone away. I won't do any work. I'll be completely home with friends or with family or whoever. And I learned that that was actually more beneficial to me being a leader than trying to get things done on that to-do list. Because you have to be thinking about what my assistant superintendent told me. She said, Todd, you could leave this job and in 20 years, nobody will probably ever remember that you were here. But if your family leaves you in 20 years, they're still going to remember that you weren't there for them. And that hit me so hard to realize that I was putting all of my effort into work and giving my family what was left. And that's the opposite of what we should, not the opposite, because you don't want to give your school what's left of you. But I needed to balance it more in understanding that who am I giving and what am I giving them. So here's what I want you to do right now. There are people in all of your lives who have played an important role in what you are doing. So I want you to take time right now. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. I want you to pick up your phone. I want you to text someone. It can be personal or professional. It doesn't matter. And just tell them that you're grateful for them or how much they mean to you. Now, some of you may need to preface this text with, I'm not dying, because they're going to be shocked to hear from you. When I had to do this in my first training, I had to be like, hey Liz, I'm not dying, but we're in a PD. They want us to text somebody. You were the person I picked, so you might need to preface your person with that. But I want you to just take a couple of minutes to pour into someone else and just show gratitude. Because research has shown that gratitude is the biggest way you can increase your own mood. Because when you show gratitude to others, it actually increases your mood more than the person you're showing gratitude to. So take just a minute or two and text someone in your life and just tell them that you're thankful for them and why. Or just tell them you're thankful for them. And if you don't have anybody, pick somebody and lie to them. Gratitude is the number one way to improve your mood. Any day I'm having a rough day, I know that that's the time I need to go pour into somebody else. And it's so funny because my friends have learned me enough that when I text them something really sweet, they'll be like, you're having a rough day, aren't you? And I'm like, yes, but do you feel better? And they're like, yes, I'm good, then I feel better knowing that this made your day. And so just knowing that on my roughest days, that's what I do. I text somebody, I call somebody, I go visit somebody, I leave them a sticky note, I do something else, but I pour into other people. Because I'm always thinking about where does the research lie in things. And that's where the research in gratitude shows that you're increasing your own mood more. So even if you do it selfishly, you're still doing it in a way that's going to uplift somebody else while also uplifting yourself. My advice to you is put on your calendar at least 3 days a week to show gratitude to someone. Why do I tell you to put it on your calendar? Because I went to a training that talked about how many of us as leaders live and breathe off of our calendar. So why don't we put even the most mundane things on our calendar? And I thought, well, why would you do that? And he said, because when it's on your calendar, you remember to do it. Otherwise, you're just a well-intentioned individual who lets things fall by the wayside. And so on my calendar, there were parts of the day where it said, check your email, check your voicemail, send a note to somebody. Because even though that those things only took a couple minutes, and it may have been a 15-minute block on my calendar, it still was my personal reminder, because I'm living and breathing off my calendar anyway. And then once you do something so many times, it becomes habit. So then once I know that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8:30, my phone dings with don't forget to send a note to somebody, then I naturally start doing it every single day. So I encourage you to start thinking about how you can use your calendar for stuff like that. It's important, though, that you remember that people don't just see who you are or what you do, they see who you are. Because sometimes as leaders, we can be like, oh, I'm going to do this really sweet thing. Let me give you an example. And this may hurt some of your feelings, but it's not my intention. Some of us really well-intentioned leaders have seen social media, and we do some of the things other principals or other leaders are doing, like the snack cart that comes down the hall, where it's a really well-intentioned idea of, oh, look, I got all these little snacks, I have a little cute hat, I've got a little theme, especially if you're elementary, we theme everything out, and it's like you come down the hall and you're like, oh, don't you just feel so appreciated? And they're like, well, yeah, I'll take a bag of chips, but I still hate you because you're the devil. Because even if you be nice to them and bring them a snack, they know who you really are. That's not going to change their opinion of you. And sometimes as leaders, we get this false mindset of, well, but this principal said that their teachers just love this every Friday. Well, they might love the free food, but they may not love the person. It's not changing the culture of your campus. It's not making you a better leader. But when they see you as somebody who genuinely cares about them, then the snack cart does hit both of the realms. But you can't just think that, oh, well, I went to this training and they said do this and it's going to build up the culture, that it will change their culture. Because if you aren't changing, your culture will not get better if you're the only one leading things and they don't like you. So you have to always be thinking about that and why are you doing things? Because again, I worked under the superintendent who I hated. I often tell teachers, when teachers try to complain about their principal, I was like, look, I worked under these 5 different principals. My first principal, she was a screamer, literally could hear her scream at staff down the hall, and I was terrified of her, but she never yelled at me, so it was all good. The second principal I had, I testified in her trial, and she went to jail, so beat that. The third principal I have, I still love her to this day. I want to be just like her. And the last principal I had was like Satan straight from hell. So I've seen very different leadership. And I know that even when they try to pretend to be somebody somewhere else, it doesn't change my perspective of them at all. And so even though my superintendent, who I couldn't stand one of the superintendents I worked under, when he would bring everybody a Sonic drink to our principal's meeting, it was like bitter in my mouth because I couldn't stand him and I knew he was trying to manipulate us by something free. And it's like, no, this don't change who you are. And so we have to remember that when we're doing these things. And how do we know who we are? Feedback. Now let me be clear. This is not those end of the year surveys. Those are straight from the devil. I don't know why all these districts that I've worked in still do those end of the year teacher surveys, because all they do is give you all the negative stuff from 3 people on campus who actually took the time to fill it out. And then what do we do as leaders? We over-obsess over those people. And we feel less than when we see something negative. And we're like, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? And I remember sitting with my admin team, and one of them looked at me and said, why are you so focused on this one issue that one person has? Look at the answers. We know who wrote it. It's the same way they write their emails. We can tell exactly who they are, even though it was anonymous, because it was an anonymous survey, but some people answer the same way they talk and the same way they write emails. And so it's like, they just complain about everything. You don't need to appease them. And it reminded me of what my advisors told me. He said, Todd, you could buy every single teacher at your school a Ferrari, and someone's going to look at you and say, why isn't mine red? You will never please everyone. And when we focus on trying to get those negative people up into a positive place, you know what happens? All the positive people resent you because all your energy is going to the negative person. Same thing that happens when you're in the classroom. If all your time is spent on the discipline issue, the other kids feel less important and invisible. And then they start misbehaving so that you show them attention too. And so here's what I mean by feedback. I believe that sometimes we can think that the people who are in our circles need to be encouragers and cheerleaders. And I call that the American Idol effect. Because what I mean by that is sometimes we can have these people in our circles where it's like, oh my gosh, I need these encouragers, I need these uplifters. And it's just like on American Idol. When somebody goes and tries out for American Idol and their mom or dad is sitting outside the room going, they're just so wonderful, they're just so good. And then they try out and it is beyond terrible. Like everybody knows it's bad. And they don't get through to Hollywood. They go back out the room. And what do the parents say? We'll get him next year. We'll come back. And it's like, no, somebody needs to tell that kid this is not the career for them. You are leading them down a false path. When all the people in your circle only encourage you, it gives you a false reality of who you are. Now, you need encouragers in your circle. Don't hear me wrong here. But in your circle, there should be people who tell you no. People who tell you that's inappropriate. You need to apologize. Or even, it's not your time yet. But they do it from a place of love. Because that's when we can take the feedback. You should not be taking feedback from everybody you interact with. Because some of their opinions do not matter and should not make you change the way you are. But we get in this mindset of, well, I'm a leader now. I have this new title. So their opinion matters. No, it doesn't. Some people just will not like you, and they never will like you. They don't like your voice. They don't like your hair. They don't like your kids. They don't like your whatever. And there's nothing you can do to change that. So I take their feedback with a grain of salt, and I focus on those because I know in my circle I have blunt people who will keep it real with me. So because I have that, I know who I am because they remind me of who I am. And feedback is not something you can just expect to receive. You have to ask for feedback. This was a lesson I learned when I was in a training about this, and they said, when was the last time you asked your spouse for feedback? And I said, what do you mean? And it's like, well, have you ever asked people in your life who you're close to, how do you experience me? It's an interesting question to ask someone. How do you experience me? And I said, well, why would I ask my wife that? They were like, well, maybe there's something that she could give you that's feedback on who you are. And I said, my wife is real blunt. She didn't have any issue telling me when something ain't right. So I don't have to worry about that. And they said, no, you may have somebody in your life who's blunt, but they may not giving you the feedback you need because you haven't asked for it. Some people are just waiting for that invitation. So ask. So we had our boys for about 3 months at this time. And so I messaged her and I was like, hey, I'm at a training. I need to ask this question. How do you experience me? What is one thing that you wish I did differently? And she had an answer back in like 10 seconds. And I was like, damn, she was waiting for this question. And she said, it's funny you asked this. She said, because I know that these are our first kids, we've never had kids before, we're new parents, and there's sometimes when I do something with them, and you'll either look at me a certain way or say something, and it makes me feel like I'm not doing it right, even though we're both learning how to do this at the same time. And I had no idea I was doing that. And then by her saying that, I could watch out for it and change it. And I can't tell you how many things changed in our relationship right then. And I said, well, why didn't you tell me this? Like, you tell me everything. And she said, because we're getting no sleep right now. I don't need one more thing to rile up something between us when we're already having frayed edges because the kid's not sleeping. So sometimes people in our life need us to ask for feedback from them. So think about it. Maybe once a month you reach out to somebody in your life who you respect and say, how do you experience me right now? Because they always say, you know what, you used to be a really positive person, but lately it's just been rough. And I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to add to your plate, but since you asked, I see this in you. If you are not asking for feedback, you're not truly concerned about getting better. Because you just let the people who say the nice stuff come and say the nice stuff, and the people who complain come and complain. When we have to be thinking about who are the people in our lives that we can ask that feedback from. And then when we're asking for feedback, we also have to realize that as leaders, our biggest calling is growing others into their fullest potential. Whether that's at home, in your friends, or at work. As a teacher, I loved when I could see a kid's light bulb finally go off. And I thought that was like the pinnacle of how exciting it could be to be an educator until I became a principal. And you know what I learned as a principal? It was exciting seeing a kid's light bulb go off. It was 100 times more exciting to get an adult to believe something in themselves that I could see but they couldn't quite see yet. When I could have a 5th grade teacher who I knew was not meant for 5th grade, that clearly was not in their line of skill sets, and I knew that they were meant to be a kindergarten teacher. And I moved them down to kindergarten. And they kick and scream just like a toddler, and they cry, and they cuss you out, and they say that they don't want kindergarten, it's the worst grade level ever. And then 3 months into the job, they come back and say, this is where I was meant to be the whole time. I know I didn't see it, but now I just can't thank you enough because this has changed everything. That is so exciting for me. Or when I go to a teacher and I'm like, hey, 3rd grade needs a team lead. I think you'd be a great team lead. Oh no, I'm just too quiet, or I'm not comfortable. It's like, no, I'll help you along the way, but I think this could really be powerful for you. And then you watch them come into their own and see that. To me, that was so much more exciting than with kids. Kids was great, but the adults is where the game-changing aspect came in. Or where I can help a family finally see something in their child that they had never seen before. Because as the principal, I had a new perspective of it. Or as a coordinator, I had a new perspective of it. And so developing people is what we do, whether that is our own children, our spouses, our friends, our family members, or at work. That's where our true value comes in as a leader. But no matter how we are trying to grow as leaders, we all have gaps. These are 6 of the most common gaps that people have. Whether it's you don't know how to do it, you're afraid to fail, you don't have any inspiration, you feel stuck, or you're in the comparison gap of everybody's doing it better than me. I'm just not as good. And if you're like me, you never just have one gap. You've got like 2 or 3 or 4 gaps happening all at the same time that are overwhelming you. So here's what I want you to do at your table. I want you to talk about which one of these gaps are you seeing in your life. Now you might see more than one. That's fine. Just pick one and talk about, you know what, this is kind of the gap that I'm struggling with right now because of this. Like for me, I will tell you, a gap that never goes away but that I am always working on is my comparison gap. No matter how good I do something, no matter how successful I get at something, I'm always looking at, well, they did it better. Well, they did this and they did that, and I'm not doing this, and I must not be measuring up here. And I'm always working on my mindset, but I know that that's a gap in my leadership that I'm always having to work on. The other gap that comes at different points of the year is my inspiration gap, where I'm just like, I'm just burnt out. Like, I don't feel inspired at all. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to solve this. And then I have to figure out, how do I fill in that gap, and who do I reach out to? So share with people at your table, what is one of the gaps that you are feeling right now and why? Go. Now, hopefully, these are causing some reflection in yourselves, and maybe you looked at there and thought, I don't have any gaps right now. And man, give yourself a high five, because that is great for you. But for the rest of us, I'm sure we can at least identify one gap in here. Now, one thing that I want to give you right now is something you can take back to your staff, which is different call and responses for students. At some point, your teachers are going to be working with kids, and they're going to try to re-get their attention. At some point, you're going to be leading a meeting or a training, and you're going to need to re-get people's attentions. And you know, saying, hush, everybody be quiet, come back together, doesn't work. Even going, shh, not only does it shower people with germs, it just doesn't work. And so, for whatever reason, our brains, when we hear the word shh, we just start ignoring people right away. We're like, oh my God, they're so annoying. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Or, well, I'm about to finish this conversation before I go on. Because what I tell people is, as adults, what I've learned is that teachers are always going to behave exactly like the kids they complain the most about. Yes. I can't tell you how many staff meetings I've been in where the teachers at the back of the room who talk the whole staff meeting then want to come up to you at the end and say, hey, I have this issue with this kid. They just don't stop talking. I'm like, I know, neither do you. So that's why. And so for me, I have to realize I have to practice some of these things with my staff that they can then take back and use. And call and responses are huge. And to get your teach on, we especially love them, and we use lots of different ones. And so the first one I'm going to teach you that you can share with your people is called rainfall. And I learned this one at a student leadership conference. I was there with my student council, and they talked about using this one with kids because when you have a call and response, you need a physical element and a verbal element. Because your goal is not to get everybody to do the call and response. Your goal is to get enough people to do it where it brings the attention of everybody back without you having to scream at them. And so this one is called I said rainfall, but it's actually called waterfall. I don't want to say rainfall. It's called waterfall. And the way it works is whenever my kids, I have them do a task, and they're working in groups, and it's talking, and I need to bring them back together, all I say at a normal voice level is, and a hush fell over the crowd. And as soon as whoever hears me say that, they raise their hands and go, shh, really gently, not hard, not where spit's flying out of their mouth, really gently. And you know why I only need 2 or 3 kids to do it? Because the hand movement would have caught somebody's eye, or the noise would have caught somebody's ear. Because it's just gentle enough where I'm like, whoa, what was that? Not where it's loud and obnoxious, where it's just gentle enough. And then they all know, oh, it's time to come back into focus. So that's one that I teach my staff and I use with my students is the waterfall. And again, I never raise my voice. I never say, and a hush fell over the ground. I don't do anything like that. I just say it quiet enough where at least 2 or 3 kids can hear me. And even if I need to go stand in the middle of some kids to make sure that they hear me, that's what I do, where they can bring it all back down and it brings the whole group back together. So that's one of the call and responses. I'll show you another one later. As a leader, we have to understand that everybody has gold within them. This is a very difficult lesson because as you work with people throughout your life, you know some people you don't believe there's gold within them because they are just trying your every nerve. If you're like me, at some point in your career, there's been somebody who you thought, I might be okay with going to jail to deal with this person. And so when we have those people, it's like their voice annoys you, the way they do their hair, the way they dress, everything about them annoys you. What I've had to realize is that's not on them. That's on me. I'm choosing to find that annoying, obnoxious, whatever. Because though I may be feeling this way about this person, in somebody else's world, they're their entire world. They're the most amazing person on the planet. And that's what makes each of us different. There's a line that I'm sure you can finish for me that we've all been raised with. And that is, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And do you know how dumb that advice is? Because it's 2023 now. If they don't have something nice to say, they're going to put it on Twitter. They're going to go and close their door and run their mouth and then walk out of the room with a smile on their face and talk about you behind your back. We don't no longer say don't say anything at all. They'll say it. They'll just find a way to say it. Because everybody's lost their filter these days. You've seen school boards. You've seen crazy parents. You've seen people, they don't have any kind of concern anymore. People are going to think about them. That's why I don't teach my own children or my students that phrase, because I don't believe in that phrase. I teach them what Kid President took that phrase and changed it to. And I'm sure you all remember Kid President. And what he said was, if you don't have something nice to say, you're not thinking hard enough. And that's the phrase we use in my house, and that's the phrase I work with my students and my staff. Because guess what? If I don't have something nice to say, that is not on you, that's on me. I'm not thinking hard enough. Because there is something good to find in everyone. And just like gold, Gold does not sit on the surface. It has to be dug. It has to be sifted through mud and water. Sometimes it has to be searched for weeks and weeks and weeks to find it. But it's always there. And if I'm going to lead well, I have to understand that there is gold in everyone, even when it's difficult to find. So as you lead, keeping that in mind is paramount to you being a great leader. Because as authentic leaders, we have to love our people even when they're messy. Because they will all get messy. You get messy. You say things you regret, have an attitude about something you don't need to have an attitude about, whatever. But we have to learn to love people even when it's messy. Now, love does not mean let them run all over you. I know some of us have grown up with that kind of love, but that's not real love. So know that love does have hard pieces attached to it. So I'm not saying this just means sunshine and rainbows, just when they're messy. But that means that you don't let their messiness define them. And you don't let them stay there as an authentic leader. And I told you this earlier when we talked about how you take off time and disconnect. You need to make sure your family and friends don't get what's left. They need to be making sure they get the best of you. If you go home and all you can do is throw yourself down on the couch, the people at your home cannot get what's best of you. If you're going home that exhausted, something needs to shift. And yes, it's really hard sometimes to find that shift. But that's where accountability partners and those truth tellers in our circles can help us see that. Because sometimes you don't know what to take off your plate until you ask somebody to help you find something to take off your plate. I can tell you, anytime my teachers get upset or overwhelmed or they feel like it's one more thing, I will always remember when I sat with my 4th grade team for the first time and did this. They were losing their minds. They said, it's just all too much. We don't know how to keep up. This is all these expectations. And so I sat down with them and I said, okay, walk me through every single thing you're being asked to do. And they would say, well, y'all want lesson plans by this time. And I'm like, okay, that's a district mandate. I can't change that. Yes, go on, next. Well, you said once a week we need to be doing this. And I was like, whoa. Okay, yeah, take that off your list. Don't worry about that. But you said, I know I did, but I'm going to take it off your list right now because these other things that are legally mandated or district mandated, I can't take those off your, but I can take this off your plate. Right. And they needed me to sit with them and tell them they could take it off. Because they're like, oh, well, you don't need to be doing that. Well, there's the AP said, okay, I'm telling you, you don't need to be doing that. And they could see that I'm willing to listen, but they couldn't see the forest for the trees because they were so caught up in it. So knowing that as well. As you go and lead, what we're going to talk about after lunch are all the ways you can build up the culture to create environments that people are running into instead of running out of at the end of the day. Having things that you can do where you connect each other personally, where you build relationship with those kids, all of this stuff and many more are things that we are going to talk about this afternoon. But the last thing I'm going to lead you with before we go to lunch is this. Please don't find yourself falling into this trap of, well, as soon as I do these things, then I can do this. Because all you're going to be left with is regrets when tragedy strikes and all you want is 5 more minutes. I have found myself in this trap as well, where now I say, no, I don't want to miss this, so I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go straight and be a part of this. I'm not going to miss this event. I'm not going to do this. Because life is fragile, and the people we hold most dear are not promised to us in 5 minutes, much less 5 days or 5 years. If you haven't taken a vacation in years, it's time to take off work. If you're having a rough month, a personal day is not a bad thing. We've been conditioned to these beliefs as educators. We've been conditioned to believe if we are not selfless, we are not doing well as a teacher or a principal or so-and-so. Well, guess what? That's why our field is falling apart at the seams. Because we are trying to be everything to everyone all the time, but yet always being told what we're not doing enough of. We've never, ever, ever got to feel successful. Because the moment we taste that success, the finish line moves. The moment we get ahead, new mandates come down and new paperwork we have to do. This is not a field where we can solve a disease and feel successful, where we can end a case and find out that our client won the case and we can move on to the next one. That doesn't happen in this field, which is why it breaks my heart, and I was part of the problem too, that we're so falling apart because we don't prioritize ourselves. I'm not telling you to be the most selfish person you can be. I'm telling you that you matter too. That taking a personal day, if your campus falls apart when you take a personal day, that's a sign of your leadership to begin with. So that's even more of a reason to take a personal day, because people need to learn how to run things when you're not there, because you're not promised to be there. You can hit a deer on the way to work and not be able to go into work that day, and guess what? They need to know how to do stuff. So maybe you need to find some more teacher leaders to do it, maybe you need to find some other things to happen. But the reality is, if you're saying, well, I can't go to that doctor appointment, I can't go to that dance recital, I can't go to this or that, that's you making that choice, and it's just one day closer to you breaking apart. I don't want to retire and retire broken and have nothing positive to look back on except that career wiped me out. And I know being in a room with administrators and people who have served in administrative roles, principal job is unlike any other job. The reality is every job in education is unlike any others. If you think about it, when you were in college, you swore you knew what a teacher did and you couldn't wait to have your classroom. Then you got your first classroom and realized everybody lied to you just to get you in there. Then when you're a teacher, you're like, I know what them admin do. I could be assistant principal. They don't do nothing but sit in their office. They have cookies all day. Then you become an assistant principal and realize everybody lied to you. Oh my God, there's so much you have to do. And then when you're an assistant principal, you're like, the principal's my best friend. Like, I could totally be principal. They share everything with me. Then you become a principal and you're like, oh my gosh, there was so much they didn't share with me. Because what I learned, the biggest thing I learned as a principal, 90% of my job I will never be able to tell anybody about without getting in legal trouble. Right. Nobody understands the amount of CPS visits I was on, the court cases I had to go sit into, the decisions I had to make that affected everybody, but I had to own that decision, even when the decision came from the superintendent, but I had to pretend like it came from me because the superintendent said to do that. And then everybody hates you, and you just have to take the hate and fall on the sword. Like, nobody gets those kind of things until you've served in that role, which is why it's even more important. And going to a PD is not taking a personal day. Taking a personal day is when you put your phone away when you leave work, and you're not worried you're going to miss an important phone call because they don't know how to do that IEP meeting, or there's an R that came up, or this kid acted out. They got to figure it out because you had to figure it out at some point too. But taking care of yourself is not selfish. That's why I talk about therapy. It's why I talk about taking a lunch break. It's why I talk about personal days. It's why I talk about go on a vacation. Don't be afraid to do those things because they are time. There will be a day when you will wish you had and then you no longer can. So we're going to dive into our last hour together. I'm going to share with you a bunch of culture building ideas. And this whole presentation for this last hour is called Be Brave, because this is how we ended our announcements every single day at our school. Every single day at the end of the announcement we would say, don't forget the most important rule at Webb Elementary, be brave. Because we wanted that to be the culmination of everything that we did. Be brave enough to take risks, be brave enough to try again, be brave enough to say I'm sorry, be brave enough to make new friends. Whatever it is applies for kids and adults. So my encouragement for you today is to be brave enough to try some of these ideas. And when I think about what I've always done as an educator, there's this quote that I've always had posted in my office, on my desk, and it's this quote by Margaret Mead. Because sometimes those of us who have worked in very rural areas can wonder if the impact we have really matters. I've always been working around people who were like, oh my gosh, you could have the next president of the United States in your class. And I'm like, well, thanks, but you know, my kids don't leave the county, much less the state. Like, that really doesn't make me feel great, because what if I don't? Does that mean I wasn't a good teacher? Or, well, you might have the next kid who solves cancer. And I'm like, but again, if I don't, does that mean we didn't do a good job at our school? And I had to use this quote to push me, to remind me that when you look at history, history is always made by a singular individual or a small group of people. So though I may not have the next president of the United States at my school, I might have my town's next best mechanic, who, because they came in my class or my school, wanted to stay in this community, serve this community, became a mechanic, and saved 6 lives with an issue they solved. And that kid is just as important as the next president of the United States. So this is my grounding quote to remind me that the impact that I do and what I do, it matters in the work that I'm doing. But when it comes to building up the culture of your campus, sometimes the culture of your the culture of your campus can look a little bit like this.
Tomorrow night, Robinson Cano, the former New York Yankee All-Star second baseman, returns to Yankee Stadium for the first time
Y'all hear that okay?
since he left for a 10-year, $240 million contract with the Seattle Mariners. Now, obviously, Cano's going to hear a fair share of boos when he steps up to the plate tomorrow, and well, that could be jarring for any player. So that's why, to get him used to it, we sent Robinson Cano out to the streets of New York to get booed by actual Yankee fans. But here's the catch. The fans thought they were just booing a cardboard cutout of Robinson Cano. They didn't realize that the real Robinson Cano was standing right behind it. Their reactions are pretty great. Check it out.
Hi, I'm Robinson Cano, and I'm about to get booed by some Yankees fan.
Are you a Yankee fan?
Yes.
Now, Robinson Cano is coming back to Yankee Stadium tomorrow night for the first time since becoming a Seattle Mariner. Are you going to boo him?
Of course.
All right, well, we have this picture of him right behind you, so whenever you're ready, go ahead and boo it as much as you want.
Ooh, you know what? You're no longer welcome here. Bye.
Try again.
You no longer...
Robinson Cano is coming back to Yankee Stadium tomorrow night for the first time since becoming a Seattle Mariner. Are you going to boo him?
I know yeah.
Well, whenever you're ready, go ahead. All right, give me your best boo.
Boo! You suck!
That was awesome. Maybe try it again.
Should I try it again?
Yeah. How you doing, Robbie? Welcome back to New York.
He won a World Series ring here, but he did leave for the money, so...
Why don't you go ahead and give him as many boos as you want?
Come on, Robinson. I mean, how many World Series titles do the Mariners have? Come on, boo! You're better than that. You got a beard now? You're better than that. Boo!
Now, I know you've never walked around a corner and had everybody stop talking before, and you're like, I'm not stupid, you were just talking about me. And they're like, no, you look so cute today. And you're like, stop, you don't have to pretend, I hate you too. Like, sometimes that's how our school environments are. People will run their mouths in a classroom and then come out of there and smile to your face and act a different way. But if we allow that culture to fester, it will take over our campuses. This was my school family. Yes, we look like a bag of Skittles. There's a whole reason behind it. We had a house system like Harry Potter, so that's why all of our shirts were in our house colors. But I look at this photo and I'm reminded that photos lie. When we look at photos, we always tend to remember the good things. Think about the photos you have in your house or on your phone. When you scroll through them, you say, oh, remember this? Oh, look at this photo. Even though most of your family photos, there's probably somebody in that photo you can't stand, like your mother-in-law. Or you have a memory of, oh, look how cute my kids were, because you forgot that 5 minutes before that photo was taken, they were screaming, crying, threatening, and bribing. And the truth of this school photo is it's the same at your school. Before you take a big photo, somebody's going to be crying, somebody's going to be yelling at somebody else, somebody's going to be threatening to quit. That's just how life is, because photos don't tell the whole story. And when I told you earlier, I worked underneath 5 principals. I know how different leadership works in a school. And when I work with teachers from across the United States, the number one thing they tell me is, oh, you specialize in culture? Help us. Our culture sucks. And I'll say, okay, well, tell me a little bit more. And they'll say, well, it's the principal's fault, or the admin. And I always remind them, you say it's the admin's fault, but you do realize that one angry cafeteria lady can ruin an entire year for a child, right? That one rude front desk receptionist can make a family never come back to your school again. That one hateful team member can make you second guess a career you've dreamed of your entire life. So don't tell me it's all the admin. What are you doing to make it better? And they'll look at me and say, well, nothing. I'm not the problem. And I get to say, oh, guess what? If you're doing nothing to make the culture at your campus better, you are part of the problem because it takes all of us. And they'll say, well, what am I supposed to do? And I'll say, oh, you could start by just writing a note to the teacher across the hall and tell them they're doing a great job. You could make cookies if you're a 5th grade teacher for the kindergarten team and beg them to keep showing up for work so you don't get moved down to kindergarten. You could go find your school secretary and give your school secretary a hug because he or she gets cussed out more than anybody else on campus. You could go find that first-year teacher who doesn't even teach in your grade level and go tell them you're so thankful they're at your school. Every single thing you do doesn't have to cost money. But if you're doing nothing to make the culture better, you are part of the culture problem. Now, when I think about that, then I think about, well, when I work with a group of people and I ask them to define themselves, it breaks my heart that in most groups, people don't use the word leader to define themselves. And we talked a lot this morning about being a leader and being an authentic leader. But I guarantee you, even if I asked you today to define yourself in 3 words, I bet leader wouldn't have been one of those 3 words. Because we're uncomfortable using that. But the reality is, like I said earlier, you are all leaders. I don't care what your job title is. And when I think about defining the word leader, I think about what I go back to. And I go back to my own faith, and I think about Jesus and how he got on his hands and knees to wash the disciples' feet. Now, I'm not telling you to go wash people's feet. It's 2023, there's machines that do that, and it's disgusting. What I'm telling you is, are you willing to serve those around you? Because that's the #1 sign in my eyes of a great leader. If a great leader is not willing to get down and serve, they're never going to be a great leader, or at least not somebody who's followed very long. So what does that look like in our careers? Well, there's several ways that we can lead by serving. In Texas, queso is its own food group. We can have it in every meal, all the time. I love me some homemade queso. So maybe one night I go home and make a crock pot of queso, and I can show up at your door at 8:15 in the morning with chips and queso and say, would you like some chips and queso? And your answer will always be yes. Because as educators, we love 2 things. Free food and spending somebody else's money. If somebody gives us one of those 2, we are happy for that day. And so I would make homemade apple cider and just stop by and say, hey, I made this last night. I was thinking of you. Would you like some? Because what I used to do as the principal was stop by the donut shop. Grab a bunch of donuts and kolaches, leave them in the lounge, send a text out, there's free donuts in the lounge. They're like, well, they like free food, here you go. And I thought, look at me serving my people. Until I reflected and realized that me bringing donuts was not me serving my people. Because I didn't make the donuts. I didn't even package the donuts. I was just the Uber driver who brought the donuts to the school, but yet I'm asking you to give me all the credit for pouring into you on a really inexpensive meal. And I thought, okay, well then how can I make this a serving thing? Well, I went to Walmart, I bought some waffle makers, and instead, when you came in, I'm mixing up Bisquick and saying, how many waffles would you like? And I'm putting them in the waffle makers and saying, there's a toppings bar over there, go enjoy some waffles today. Or I bring a grill at lunch in the bus rider line, I'm grilling hot dogs and hamburgers for people. Or I bring one of those little indoor grills and I'm grilling them in the teacher's lounge. Wherever I need to let people see that I'm willing to serve them. And then earlier I talked to y'all about that snack cart. And a little bit of why I had an issue with that, because some people like to act like people will love them if they bring a snack cart by. The other issue I have with the snack cart thing is it doesn't show that you truly know your people. And in the end, as humans, we want to feel seen, heard, and loved. If you can reach that side of me, you've got me. But sometimes, as administrators or as leaders, we like to think some things that have great intentions and aren't bad on the surface will do great things. Well, guess what? You bring a snack cart by my room and say, would you like something off the snack cart? Or, if you were like me, you went to Walmart and got those big box variety chips, and you buy some 12 packs of sodas, and you set them up in the lounge, and you theme it out, because again, we theme everything, and I would say, like, come by, stop by the lounge and eat that chip off your shoulder, or whatever the theme was. And as they would come down, they'd come in and they'd go, oh, awesome, free food. Oh, I only eat crunchy Cheetos. Thanks, though. Or, oh, I only drink Diet Dr. Pepper. Thanks, though. Because what was I doing? exactly what I told my teachers not to do. I was doing a one-size-fits-all award, prize, giving of them. But then I was telling them in class, get to know your kids, differentiate, make sure you're meeting all the needs. But then I was saying, here's your sodas and chips. If you don't like these, too bad. It's all I brought for today. I pushed that cart down the hallway. If your favorite snack or drink isn't on there, too bad. You better be glad I even brought this by at all. That's kind of the message I'm sending. Because think about it. If you love a Diet Coke, and somebody stops by your room and said, hey, I was thinking of you. I brought you a cherry Pepsi. Do you feel very appreciated in that moment? No, because you're thinking, thanks for the drink I will never drink. I drink Diet Coke. But I guess thanks. And so I had to get to know my people. And here's what I did. I would send out that survey at the beginning of the year of emergency contact, t-shirt size, all that stuff. And on there, I had several other questions. I had, what's your favorite snack or drink from the gas station? Which restaurant has your favorite French fries? And then I would say, what is your favorite Sonic drink? Because in Texas, Sonic is like crack for teachers. I mean, you want to make them cry, it's not be like Oprah and bring them a new car. You just bring their Route 44 Diet Coke light ice with one squeeze of lime, and they will cry every time. And so for me, it was knowing their favorite Sonic drink. So when they were having a rough day, or their team, or the grade level, or the whole hallway, I could go to Sonic and bring each person their individualized favorite thing. So what I want you to do very quick is with your people at your table, I want you to share. If somebody were to show up tomorrow to your office or your classroom or whatever door with your favorite snack or drink, what would they show up with that would make your day? Now here's 2 rules. Number 1, this must be legally allowed at your job. So a margarita machine does not count. And then I worked with a group in West Virginia and had to add a new rule on here because of their inappropriate answer. And when I say your favorite drink or your favorite snack, an unacceptable answer is something like Ryan Gosling because he's a snack. No, that cannot show up at your door. This has to actually be able to show up. So for an example, my answer would be extra toasty Cheez-Its. Don't bring me the regulars. I didn't say I like regular Cheez-Its. If you bring me extra toasty, then I love it. That's my go-to snack for me. So when somebody shows up with that, I feel seen in that moment. So real quick, take a couple seconds, share with them your favorite snack or drink. Go. Okay, so hopefully you had some time to share your favorite snack or drink, and there's a reason I had you do it. Because who in here works somewhat nearby to the people they're sitting next to? Anybody? Okay, so I wanted you to do this because hopefully you were sitting next to someone who works nearby, because now if your favorite snack or drink doesn't show up this year, you know who sucks in your life. Because you've told them what your favorite snack or drink is, so they should be thinking of you at some point this year. And that's the reason I had you do that, because sometimes we make excuses like, oh, they don't even know, we don't ever have time to talk about that, it's always data or discipline or things. And sometimes we just need time to talk. That's why within staff meetings, there was always a point to share something with other people, that they could get to know you a little bit better. Now you might be thinking, this is so dumb, like it's just a snack or drink. And it's not the snack or drink that makes the difference. What makes the difference is when someone uninitiated shows up at your door and says, hey, I saw these Sour Patch Kids the other day and I thought of you, so I just wanted to bring them and tell you thank you for all you're doing. It's not the snack that makes the difference. It's the matter of fact that I came to your mind when nobody told you I had to, and you also remembered something that I said. That's when I feel seen and heard in that moment. And so that's hopefully some ideas of ways that you can pour into those around you. I believe our job as educators is a lot like missionaries. Missionaries do not sit in church and beg you to come to church. They go out and serve. So how are you getting off of your campuses to go meet your families? Everything we did at my school when I took it over was at school. The holiday program, the meet the teacher night, the literacy night, everything happened at our schools. And when families weren't attending, I ignorantly thought it was because they didn't value their kids' education. And why did I ignorantly think that? Because all of our initial reactions to things come from our own upbringings. My own upbringing, my mom came to everything I was a part of because she said education is important. I'm going to be there. And so growing up, I thought if your parents aren't there, they must not value education. That's an ignorant thought, because as I educated myself and actually talked to families, I learned the real reasons they weren't at events. And it wasn't because they didn't value education. I learned that there were 3 reasons why families in my community weren't coming to things. Now let me tell you a little bit about the community I taught in. 93% of my students fell below the poverty line. 85% of them were minority majority. and 40% of them had a minimum of one parent who was incarcerated because we were near a prison. So we had a lot of things working against us. And when I talked to families to figure out why they weren't coming to events, the 3 answers that came up was number 3, they said, Todd, I don't have a working car. So even if I wanted to be there, there's no way for me to get there. Or my washing machine's broke and I don't have any clothes that don't stink and I'm not showing up without people smell me. Number 2 most popular answer, sorry Todd, I work multiple jobs. It's food on the table or a Christmas program. I think food on the table is a little bit more important. But the number 1 most said answer that I was not expecting at all was, I'm sorry, I dropped out of school in junior high or high school and it's too painful to walk back on those campuses. And I had never taken that into consideration, that that's why families weren't coming to events. And so when I heard that, I thought, we don't have to do every single event at school. I can partner with churches and the mayor and the city manager and the VFW and the Masons and use other businesses around the town to have our events, some of them off campus. Now some events you can't have off campus, you just need to control the environment better, but some events you can. Then I thought, I started thinking, and I also have a lot of kids who live in apartments or trailer parks. We could also go out to them. So every single semester, we loaded up a grill and we went to apartments and trailer parks, set the grill up in the middle, and grilled hot dogs for everybody there. We didn't have any ulterior motives. We didn't tell them to read books at home, to do their homework, to spend more family time. We didn't do any of that. Because all we wanted to do was show up and serve. We wanted families to begin to understand that we cared about their kids more than a butt in a chair or a number on a page. And every single time we did this, we served over 350 people, never paid more than $45 to $50. Because Walmart, Sam's, and the local meat market believed in what we were doing and donated almost everything. And when we did this, there would always be somebody who come through the line who would say, who are y'all again? Why are y'all here doing this for us? We would say, oh, we're just from the schools in town. We're just here to tell you we love you. That's it. We wanted them to see that it wasn't all about get your kids passing, get your kids. No, let's see, we actually care about your kids. We care about you. We know there's a lot going on in your lives. And when we did that, that tore down more walls than almost anything else that we did. And that also taught us how powerful our words are and how much our words matter and how we use those words in different ways. One of them is we started writing letters to our kids throughout the year. I had a spreadsheet of every single staff member, and then I had a spreadsheet of every student. And throughout the year, I'm writing letters to kids and staff members and mailing them out. Why? Because research has shown that your brain interprets handwritten words differently than any other form of communication. Differently than in person, a text, an email, a phone call, whatever. When you get a handwritten message, your brain interprets it differently because your brain thinks they had to find something to write with. They had to find something to write on. They had to figure out a way to get it to me. And then it actually had to make it to me. Like, that's a lot of steps. That's why growing up, you probably remember getting letters in the mail and how exciting it was to get a letter from someone and how you couldn't wait to write them back. Anybody here get excited about an email? Not really, not unless the door prize that we just won. Otherwise, it's not really that exciting. And so that's why the handwritten notes matter. So I encourage my staff. I got district branded or school branded note cards, postcards, and I would give them out to staff. Say, hey, send letters all day. Here's your postcard. You don't have the stamps? Drop them at the office. That's literally what we do is mail stuff out all day long. We have plenty of stamps in the office. We'll get it mailed out for you. But keep a spreadsheet so you can check kids off after you sent one to them so you don't forget one. Because the moment Julie didn't get a letter, Julie ain't never going to forget. Everybody got a letter except her. But it was really powerful in us. And we didn't just focus on the person. Here's what I mean. I would write letters for my staff members. But I never wrote letters to my staff members. Part of that form I had them fill out at the beginning of the year. In addition to their emergency contact, there was a question on that form that said, who is somebody in your life that you absolutely love? What is their name, address, and phone number? Because throughout the year, when I want to recognize one of my staff members, I don't send them a letter. I send to the person they absolutely love. And I thank them for being a part of that staff member's life and for sharing them with our school. That way, that person they love can call them when they get home and say, your principal sent me a letter saying you were doing all this amazing stuff. Guess how much more special that feels to hear that from somebody you already know and love, knowing your administrator took the time to go contact them instead of telling you. It hits differently, and it allows others to celebrate you in addition to you being celebrated by your supervisor. That's why with my kids, a lot of times I didn't write letters to my students. I would write letters to their family to tell them how amazing they were, because I wanted their family to pour into them. We also started celebrating at our school something called Positive Post-it Note Day, which is actually a nationally celebrated day. And the way we celebrate this is every single staff and child gets 5 sticky notes at the beginning of the day. And by the end of the day, you should have written 2 sticky notes to your friends, 2 sticky notes to somebody who works at this school, and the 5th and final sticky note should have been written to yourself. Because it's just as important for you to recognize the greatness in yourself as it is for you to recognize the greatness in others. And when we did this, I didn't expect teachers' doors to get covered in sticky notes, but we leave those suckers up all year long to remind us that somebody likes us. And then I didn't expect for kids to come with them taped to them. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, duh, Mr. Nesloney, I want everybody to know how awesome I am. And I thought, yes, that is exactly why we do this work. You might be thinking, what standard does that cover? How is that helping my kids raise their test scores? It goes back to, if people don't like where they are, they're not going to highly achieve. And so for me, it's always thinking about what are all the ways, because many of our kids, their biggest roadblock is believing they can. Because they're constantly surrounded by things or grades or other things that tell them they're not good enough. And so for me, it's always like, how can I do these little things that take 3 to 5 minutes of my day, but yet might change a life? The physical spaces of my school are just as important as the emotional spaces. And so I'm always thinking about how can I redefine some of these spaces. For example, one year I had long white hallways in my school. I was not allowed to paint them because our school was really old and the paint on the wall was not a real color anymore because it had faded. So if we messed it up, we couldn't go buy the correct color matching color. And so I said, well, what can I do? And I thought, what do we do in our homes? We love to put photos of ourselves and our friends and our family. So I'm going to use this website called Easy Canvas Prints. And I'm going to get 40-inch by 30-inch canvas printed photos of our kids that we've taken around school doing awesome things. And we're going to line the hallways with those photos, where we could take this photo and line this whole hallway so that they could see how to do that. They could see that when they walk down the hallways. Again, might seem insignificant, but it's all about the subliminal messaging. It immediately makes you feel more comfortable in the space. Parents were begging us to buy them from us. And you might be thinking, why'd you get it on Canvas Prints? Well, because they go 90% off every other week, so you just wait for the sale. But you might think, well, why can't you just get it printed at Walmart? Or don't we have a photo, we have a poster machine, can we just print it off at school? Yes! Like, you don't have to do my idea the way I did it. I'm just trying to give you ideas here. Why did I do Canvas Prints? Because I was the principal, and I'm a texture guy. I know that in my eyes, when I see a Canvas photo, I think leveled up, fancy. And I wanted to feel fancy when I walked into a really old school. Does that mean you're not fancy if you get an 8x10 and a $1 general frame to put it in? No, that works just great for you, do it. It's all about what are you doing to do those things. We took the windows at the front of our school and worked with a company who would send them photos of our kids. They made collages and covered all the windows on the front of our school because we were in the middle of our community. So when you drove by our school, you didn't see a building that looked like every other building in the United States of America. You got to see all of our kids on those windows every single time you drove by to send that message that this is what we're about. We're about these kids. We took a white wall in my office and painted it with black chalkboard paint. So that anytime a kid came into my office to be celebrated, I could say, here's a piece of chalk, sign the wall of fame. And they'd sign the wall, and at the end of the year, since it was chalkboard paint, I get a wet washcloth, wipe it off, and I'm good to go for the next year. You might not be able to paint. Guess what? A piece of black chart paper does the same thing as chalkboard paint on the wall. It doesn't have to be fancy like that. We took a main wall in our office and built a 10-foot by 4-foot Lego wall. Why did we do that? Because we wanted a creativity station, but also a cool down station. Anytime a kid was so worked up in their emotions and they couldn't even communicate, I would drop them off the Lego wall and say, build me something, I'll be back in 5 minutes. come back after they've disconnected from their emotions by building something, and I would say, now tell me what happened in class today. When people would visit, we had this little thing that we got from Etsy that was just corrugated cardboard. And we'd say, hey, can you take a selfie with yourself in this and share out on social media how your school visit was today? Even if it wasn't great, that's fine, just share it out, because that holds us accountable and lets us get better. Then, we always talked about classroom transformations at my school, and I thought, well, I can't ask my staff to do what I'm not willing to do. So we transformed our entire front hallway in our office into a life-size Toy Story. We did web stories, a Toy Story covered every wall. I mean, every door with a different Toy Story character, had giant slinkies, giant Christmas lights, inflatable dice, and dominoes. And did we break fire code? Psh, probably, but the fire marshal wasn't there that day. And so it was all good. And you know, at any of your schools anyway, you're all breaking fire code no matter what. So these are some of the things that we did to really try to change the physical spaces. And then we started realizing we have to also talk to our kids. It can't just be about us in these physical spaces. And so that's when we started talking to our kids and realized one of the spaces they wanted to redesign was the bathroom. And why did they pick the bathroom? Because I went to them and said, how do we stop y'all from drawing on the stalls? And this group of girls said, let us redesign the bathroom. And I said, okay. I said, you've got a $150 budget, give me your Amazon wish list. They needed a full-length mirror with lights. They needed cute signs above every single toilet. They needed a really old-school clock. And I said, what's a really old-school clock? And they said, you know, those round ones with numbers on the edge. And I was like, a clock? And they're like, yeah, but not digital. I said, yeah, that's called a clock. And they said, well, it needs to be in rose gold. And I said, okay. And then they said, we need 2 air fresheners with only citrus scents. And I said, great. And they wanted the walls painted in chevron with these 2 particular colors. So during Christmas break, we actually redid the bathroom to their specifications. And they came back and were so amazed that adults actually listened that they, on their own, started a girls' bathroom club who checked the bathroom 3 times a day. And the first time that something was drawn on a stall, they came to me. And they said, we need to meet with every 3rd through 5th grade classroom. And I said, okay. And I learned something that day as an administrator. I learned that kids can say things to other kids that we couldn't have said as adults. Because when we went in that first room, they got up there and they said, hey, we're the girls' bathroom club. We redesigned, we know you love it, we do too, but we check it a couple times a day. And we noticed someone wrote on one of the stalls, girls, we know who you are, do it again and watch what happens. And I thought, dang, so we left the room. And I said, who was it? And they were like, I don't know. You lie to us all the time, so you just lie to them. And I thought, look at you already knowing how to be an adult. Yes. And so, did we have any other issues? No, because they took care of it. So then I was like, well, the boys' bathroom, we worked with one of their dads who was a graphic designer, and he was doing a big dragon on the back wall, but the boys I saw was less of a stall drawing issue and more of an aiming issue, so we had to work with that a little bit differently. But this was giving them a voice in that space. So we're going to play a quick game together now. On your table are cups. I need everybody to get a cup. And then you will need, you've got your little napkin, but you also got, are they going to need these placemats for anything? No. Okay, you've got these placemats in front of you, so you'll need to make a tic-tac-toe board on there. Big or small, it doesn't matter. It can be a little bitty, it doesn't really matter. You're just going to need to make a tic-tac-toe board on there. And what you're going to do is you are going to get with somebody else at your table or a different table. One of you, okay, y'all have to stay at group of 3, but one of y'all will have to work with one of the people from that table. But you'll get with the partner, and we're going to play something called flip cup tic-tac-toe. Now the way this works is you're going to put your cup on the edge of the table. You can put it lip down or base down. It doesn't matter, okay? What you're going to do is when you put the cup down, you're going to try to use one finger to flip it to make it land the other direction. Here's what that means. If you set it down on its lip, it must flip and land on its base. If you start it on the base, it must flip and land on the lip. You and your partner will take turns. When you go, if it flips, you get to put a letter on the board. If it doesn't, it's the next person's turn. So yes, this could be over in 3 moves if the same person wins all 3 times. But I want you to have just a couple of seconds, and we're going to see what some of you were like in college, and we're going to see what some of you weren't. And so those of you who get that, understand that. And so here's what I want you to do. So you can start on the edge, flip it either way, but you're just going to flip it and see who can win tic-tac-toe first. Ready? Okay, so why did I have you do this activity? Well, sometimes what I wanted you to do is I wanted you to play an activity where there was no real skill involved. Sometimes people don't like to do activities because somebody's really skilled at something. Like for me, I hate playing a game like horse with basketball because I know I'm not going to win. So it's not a fun experience for me. With this game, it doesn't really take any kind of skill. Some of you may figure out something that works for you, but it's not going to work every time because there's so many factors. So I wanted a game that didn't require a lot of skill, so it didn't have you feeling like an idiot if you didn't do very well as the other person next to you. Some people might have done really well because they practiced this a lot in college when they were doing drinking games. And so just know that if they did really well, that's probably why. So that was one of the reasons why sometimes you just need to play those. Now there can be other ways that you choose this. When I do a game with my faculty, I always have a purpose behind a game. Don't ever play a game with your team and expect them to all have a great time if there's not a purpose, because somebody in that crowd is going to be mad you just wasted 15 minutes of their time to play something that had no real reason. And so for me, if I was doing this with my staff, I'd add more layers than I did with you guys. So like, you'd have to answer a question or solve something to be able to flip your cup. Like there would be steps involved, or you had to do a math problem or things like that, or here's how you could take it to your classroom and do it. Like I had those kind of elements to it for my staff. We didn't have the time of your day for me to add all those elements, so I just wanted you to kind of have a little activity to do, but it didn't require anybody to get up, didn't require a lot of movement, because sometimes people are just like, I don't want to get out of my chair. I don't want to do that. So I'm always thinking of how can I do these things that sometimes makes them get up, because some people need to be made uncomfortable, but sometimes also works for people who don't like to get up and do those different kinds of things. So I'm going to skip a few slides here in an effort of time. I do want to cover these. So I'm not going to cover all these, but I want to cover a couple of ideas as we begin to wrap this up. And one of them is my celebrity of the week. This is something I did with my students, but also that I did with my staff. Every single time I had a staff meeting, I had what I picked was a couple of my celebrities of the month, because I did monthly staff meetings. In the classroom, I did this weekly. In the classroom, the way this worked is a kid would come sit up at the front of my room. I would say, Todd, you're our celebrity of the week. Come sit up here. There'd be a whiteboard behind Todd. And I would say, okay, class, tell me why you love having Todd in class right now. And for some kids, you got to grease the wheel a little bit. So they'd say things like, Todd's funny, he's on time, he's a good team player. As they're saying those things, I'm writing them on the board around Todd's head. So that when they're done, Todd's got all these affirmations written around his head. Then I snap a picture of him with all those words, and I have a little photo printer in my classroom, and I print it off and say, don't ever forget how valuable you are to this class. Though that may seem fairly insignificant, one of my students who was in 4th grade, who is now a senior in college, when she was a sophomore in college, reached out to me on Instagram and said, hey, Mr. Nesloney, came home from college break, and look what is still stapled to my bedroom wall. And it was her picture as a 4th grader with all those words around her. I've learned time and time again that what works great for kids also works great for adults. So in staff meetings, I may have a piece of white chart paper. And I may say, Julie, you're our staff member of the month. Come sit up here. Okay, staff, why do you love having Julie on this team? Just like with some kids, with some adults, you gotta start greasing the wheel a little bit. And as they say things, you do the exact same thing. You snap a photo and you give it to them. It's just another simple way to let people feel that they are valued.
So do you choose the person or the kids chose?
In my classroom, I always chose. And I had organized it enough where I would get through every kid by the end of the year. And so that's always my plan is I don't ever want somebody to not be recognized because everybody's worth being celebrated. So as I organize this, how can I make sure that there are those elements in place where that person or that everybody does get their moment in the spotlight, regardless of their behavior or their attitudes or anything like that. Number 4 up here is recess, PE, and lunch. On your worst days, embrace your inner child. Go down the slide in your dress or your suit, go swing on a swing, go break a sweat playing kickball, go sit at lunch with kids, go to PE, go to art, go to music, go to computer, go wherever and just act like a kid for those 15 or 20 minutes. It fills your bucket enough where you may not be able to get through the rest of that week because of that, but you can get through the rest of that day. And sometimes that's all we need are things to get through the rest of the day. Then I started staff monthly awards with my team. Now this, I don't believe in traditional awards. I think many of them are ridiculous. For example, an award that I hated as a teacher was when my principal would give out a perfect attendance award to the staff member who was there every day that year. Do you know how annoying that award is for the rest of us? I'm sorry I went to a doctor appointment, but let's celebrate them who showed up even when they were sick. That's how we perpetuate a culture of don't value yourself. So I refused to give out those awards. I wanted to give out ridiculous awards, because those are memorable. How do I get these? I don't Google. I go to Walmart and I let the aisles inspire me. So I went to Walmart and I said, I need an award. Walking up and down the aisles, looking for something that could inspire an award. And then I saw a toilet seat. And I had an idea. So I bought the toilet seat, I spray painted it in gold, and at that month's staff meeting, I gave out the Golden Toilet Seat Award to the teacher who had dealt with the most crap and kept on flushing. Because that is an award that people want to win. That's when they feel seen. And then, when they come to next month's staff meeting, I have new awards. But if you previously won an award, you must bring it back. And you must pass it along to someone else. Because you're responsible for the culture too. Which leads me to number 6, our positive phone calls home, how we decreased discipline by 60% in 1 year. We started a system called hats off cards, where every single week, every staff member got 6 little cards. And when they saw a kid doing something fantastic, they gave them a card, and that kid came to the office. We celebrated them and said, who do you want us to call? And we called home the person they wanted us to call and celebrated them on the phone and sent them back to school, back to class. That's all we did and decreased discipline by 60%. Because many of your most misbehaving kids just long for that positive affirmations from somebody at home. Now, does that mean we were doing a phone call at 9 and that kid was getting suspended at 9:45? Yes. But sometimes, if you look at history, that kid was getting suspended by 9:15, so we got 30 extra minutes out of them, and for some, that's a miracle. And so when we started doing this with kids, I realized we can do this with adults too. So I started writing hats off cards to my staff members, and my first one was my assistant principal. And I said, Aaron, come stop by my office, I've got a hats off card for you. So he came in, I said, hey, you did a fantastic job organizing our testing materials this year. Who do you want me to call? And he said, are you serious? And I said, yeah, that's what we do here. Who do you want me to call? And he said, oh, I guess my mom? And I said, great. Put it on speakerphone. Said, hey, Miss Marble, this is Todd Nesloney. I'm the principal where your son works. Don't worry, he's not in trouble. I was just calling to tell you he did a fantastic job organizing our testing materials, and we're so thankful for the man you raised and that you shared him with us. We just had to call and tell you. And she said, oh, my baby Aaron! He was like, shoot me in the face. And so he came back the next day and he said, okay, Todd, I've had time to sleep on it. Probably the coolest thing to happen in my adult life. He said, because as kids, we get celebrated all the time. He said, but nobody in my family is an educator. They don't get why I do what I do. No matter what I tell them, they think I just babysit all day. He said, but do you know my mom called me last night and said, so, tell me all about this testing organization that you did? And he was like, I don't know, Mom, we didn't get written up by the state. And he was like, but she was so proud of me because you called her. That took 10 seconds of my day. And it made a big impact on a person. Every single meeting we have on campus, my team knows the expectation is it better start with a phone call. I don't care if it's a grade level meeting, a PLC meeting, a team meeting, an office meeting. If there's more than 2 people in the room, the first thing somebody at that table better say is, Scott, who do you want us to call? And when Scott says, oh no, you don't have to do that, because that's what we do, we don't take compliments well. You say, oh no, that's what we do here. Let us love you. And you put the phone on speaker, celebrate Scott, hang it up, and start the meeting no more than 2 minutes late. Imagine if there were sticky notes being passed around at your school, if there were emails going out, if there were phone calls happening at every meeting. You're creating an environment. People are just like, am I going to be the next one celebrated? Or do I get to celebrate someone today? Or I can bring an award, or I can do that. There's so many things out there that you can do, but that's why these things make a difference in what happens. I want to give y'all a tech tool real quick, and it's called Kid Power. Has anybody ever heard of Kid Power before? Now, what about Go Noodle? Have you heard of Go Noodle? So teachers love Go Noodle. Now, Go Noodle's great, but you know the real power of Go Noodle? Go Noodle Plus, which is not free. It's real expensive. And I ain't got the money for that kind of stuff. I love Go Noodle because of the brain breaks, the activities, all those little short little videos, especially when the weather's bad. Then I heard about Kid Power, which I now use instead of Go Noodle. Kid Power is 100% free. UNICEF used to own it, so UNICEF has a lot of stake still in the company, even though they're not in charge of Kid Power anymore. A group called Classroom Champions owns it now. But here's why I use Kid Power instead of Go Noodle. Go Noodle, you watch a brain break. You do a video. You have these things, great, they're awesome. You're done. Kid Power, because UNICEF is still involved, you watch a video on Kid Power, a meal gets donated to a kid in another country from UNICEF. You watch a video on Kid Power, your class earns coins. That then once you've earned so many, your class can decide what local charity those coins get donated to by UNICEF. So why have a program where I can just watch videos? Or a program where I can watch the same kind of videos, but have a give back feature, and it's 100% free. What I also love about Kid Power is they have exclusive partnerships that Go Noodle doesn't have. DreamWorks, Blippi, the Laura Journer band or something like that. Miss Rachel's being worked on right now to become a partner. They just partnered with Epic Books that a lot of you have heard, your teachers have used. So they've got videos by them. It's incredible, and it will always be free because hospitals around the country are paying for it to make sure that it gets kids active and moving. So I wanted to share with you a free tech tool that you can have there. The last piece I want to share is this. I believe that every child doesn't need or want, but deserves to have a champion. Someone in their life who can remind them of how amazing they are. And I was lucky enough in my life that I had two. The woman on the left is my grandmother. One of the most hard-headed, strong-willed women I've ever met in my life, but she was the first person I called every single time something great happened in my life. Because I knew she would tell me I was amazing, and she loved me, and she was so proud, so I always called her first. My grandmother's the reason I fell in love with reading, because she'd have me write the summaries of books I was reading on index cards, and when I would visit her, I could turn them in for cash, so of course I'm going to keep reading. She's the one who taught me how to cook, and we learned very quickly together. There's a big difference between baking soda and baking powder, and they are not both meant for baking. At the age of 7, she had me make my first business card, because she said, people need to know who you are. My grandmother was always encouraging me. She was the one that when I was in the paper, I had to send her the article because she would laminate it and keep it in her purse. And we would check out at the grocery store. She'd pull it out and say, do you know this kid? That's my grandson. He's kind of a big deal. And I would say, Grandma, there are 350 names on that AB honor roll. It is not that big of a deal. But I never once had to wonder, does somebody love me? Is there somebody in my life who cares? Because my grandmother never wasted a moment to tell me. And about 11 years ago, when we found out she had pancreatic cancer, I watched this powerful, strong woman become somebody I could barely recognize. And I watched as our roles reversed. And instead of her being my cheerleader, I had to become hers. And I vividly remember my grandfather calling me and saying, Todd, she's been in the hospital for about a week. She stopped eating and talking 4 days ago. I think you need to come say goodbye. And I went to her room, and I did exactly what she demanded I do every single time I saw her, is I held her hand, and I told her everything going on in my life. And as clear as day to this day, I can remember the final hug I got to give her, and hearing her whisper 3 words in my ear. And she said, I'm so proud. And it's those 3 words that when I lose sight of who I am, when I forget why I do this work, it's those 3 words that I hold so tightly to. Because I know even though she's not here, she is still so proud. And then I think of the woman on the right, my mom. My rock. My mom is a single parent who raised my brother and I the best way she knew how. My mom worked multiple jobs, including cleaning houses, to give us the life she wanted us to have, even though most nights that was ramen noodles with a different flavoring on the table. My mom was at every single event I ever did as a kid, and I knew it because she was the loudest person in the room. My mom's what we called the my baby mama. You know, the one in the crowd going, my baby, and all the kids are like, who is that? And I'm like, I don't know. And then say, but she's got a poster with your face on it. I'm like, I know, stalker, right? Never met her before. Because it's so embarrassing, but you love it at the same time kind of thing. And when I was in high school, and my brother was in junior high, my mom came to us and said, boys, I want to go after my dreams. I want to go back to school. Can y'all help? We were like, of course, we'd love to. And so she went back and graduated from Texas A&M University 1 year before I did. We were almost in the same classes at the same time, which would have been super awkward, but she graduated with her dream job of being a teacher. And she taught for 13 years in tiny little Somerville, Texas, at Somerville Elementary, 4th and 5th grade reading and writing, because when the smaller the school, the more grade levels you teach. And she loved her job. She told my brother and I we were no longer her only children. She was now going to be going to their sporting events and their dance recitals, and she was going to be missing some of ours. We found out she was donating 42% of every paycheck to buy food and clothing for her kids, and never told a soul. My mom lived at that school. She was there 7 days a week. I swore she had a bed hidden somewhere there. And a couple of years ago, my aunt called me and said, did you know your mom got sent home from work 3 days ago? Now, my mom was really sarcastic and cussed like a sailor, so my first response was, did she cuss out the principal again? And my aunt was like, no, not this time. But you know, she found out last month she had high blood pressure. Well, she couldn't even walk from her classroom to the teacher's lounge without stopping to take a break. So the principal said, no, ma'am, we're not doing this. You're going to go see a doctor, and you're not coming back until you do. And my mom said, great, I don't go see doctors, so I'll just go home and self-medicate. So 3 days later, she called my aunt and said, okay, Nancy, I can't even walk from my bedroom to the kitchen now without taking a break. Fine, take me to a doctor. So I met them at the ER. I could hear my mom in the ER before I even got back there. And I was like, Mom, what the heck is going on? Are you even taking this seriously? She's like, I don't know what your aunt told you, but this is not that big of a deal. It's high blood pressure. They're giving me medicine. I'll be home tonight, maybe in the morning. Go home and get some rest. You are the principal. Tomorrow's Friday. And it's the Friday before spring break. You kind of need to be there. And I said, fine, keep me updated. And so I went to work the next day. About 10 a.m., my mom called and said, stay at work. And I said, what happened? And she said, well, they found out that I have a blood clot in each lung. They're not going to do anything today. Tomorrow on Saturday, they're going to push this medicine through. It breaks the clot up. I'll be home within an hour of it being done. They do it 7 to 15 times a day at the hospital. There's nothing to rush over about today. And I said, fine. Finished the work day, grabbed my wife, we went to the hospital. I could hear my mom in the ER again before I get back there. I'm like, Mom, you're so loud and crazy. Like, are you not understanding how serious this is? She's like, I don't know what you didn't understand. This hospital does this 7 to 15 times every day. They just push medicine through. It breaks the clot up. I'll be home in an hour. You need to finish your drive to Dallas. Because you see, the next day, my wife and I are supposed to be flying out of Dallas to go to our dream vacation in Jamaica that we've been saving for 5 years for. And I said, I'm not going. I'm not having something happen to you that I regret the rest of my life that I wasn't here. And she said, I'm not having you resent me the rest of your life when you miss your dream vacation and I go home tomorrow. I'm your mother. Get in the car and go. Now, my mom was not afraid to choose physical violence, so I knew that I had to listen to her. So I said, fine, I want hourly updates. She said, you're not getting that from me. Go talk to your aunt. So I went to my aunt and I said, I want hourly updates. She said, you got it. Went to Dallas, flew out the next morning to Jamaica. We landed in Miami for our connection flight. As I'm walking to my connection flight, my phone rings, and my aunt says, get on the plane and come back. Your mom coded on the table. They brought her back, but they put her into a medically induced coma. The doctors have asked everybody to be here. Within exactly 14 minutes, we were on a return flight back to Texas. And as I drove the hours back to the hospital and walked into her room, the first thing that I thought was, it's my grandmother all over again. Except this time, I'm holding the hand and telling someone something I wished I had told them. I knew for sure they could still hear me. 3 days later, one of them being my 33rd birthday, the doctor came in and said, who's the oldest? And I said, I am. He said, I need to talk to you. He said, we've come to learn that your mom has undiagnosed sleep apnea. And because she's never gotten it dealt with, it has worn her heart down so much that anything we do will kill her immediately. We need y'all to remove her from life support. As my brother and I and our wives watched my mother disappear, the first call that I made was to her principal. And she said, why are you calling me first? And I said, because those babies were her own, and they think she went home sick. And I need to be there to tell them she loved them as much as she loved my brother and I. I tell you this story for several reasons, and the first is this. My mom taught for 13 years at the same school in the same district. Never won an award. Never got one recognition, and she didn't care. She wasn't there for that. But when she passed, I swore I would tell her story at every single event I did as a reminder that your stories matter. You see, she passed away in March of that year, and that fall they were opening a new elementary, and she was really excited to be at the new school because the old school she was teaching at was real old. It had a bat infestation, and in Texas, bats are a protected species, so you can't kill them. You have to naturally relocate them, which takes 3 to 5 years. So in the process of being relocated, every teacher was given an electrified tennis racket. So as the bats flew down the hall, you would shock them out of the air, and maintenance would come collect them to naturally relocate them. This is not a joke. And so my mom would be the teacher screaming on the floor while the 5th graders in the air trying to get the bats. So she was real excited about the new school. She passed away in March and didn't get to see it open that fall. In November, the principal called and said, hey, we want a few months under our belt, but we'd love to give your family a tour in your mom's memory of what she never got to see, and we'd love to show you where her classroom would have been. And I said, we would love that. Show up at the school, it's beautiful, every new school is. We walk in and right away I see the library, which is always my mom's favorite place in the school, and I'm like, oh, look at the beautiful library. And then I look up and see that it says the Sally Ross Memorial Library. This was not placed by staff. When my mother passed away that March, her former and current students attended every school board meeting and demanded that her memory be left on that school. And the school board said, no, we don't do that. 100% of the business owners in that town showed up and said, you don't have a choice. This woman will not be forgotten for the work that she did. We will pay for it. We will install it ourselves. And though my mom never got to see that impact, it's my reminder that we have an impact nonetheless, even when it doesn't feel like that's there. Because you have kids who walk into your schools every day and go home to nobody. Nobody who tells them they love them, that they care, and you might be the only voice they hear. But just as important, you have colleagues who come into your jobs every single day who go home to nobody. Or go home to somebody who's damaging you. And you have the gift of I see you, I love you, I value you, please come back tomorrow. My wife always says, you end your messages on such a depressing story. Like you need some kind of palate cleanser. So there's your palate cleanser, my really cute, adorable children who have bitten each other 4 times today, I found out during lunch. But there's them. But I want to end with this. There's always going to be somebody who tells you you're not good enough, you don't work hard enough, you're not creative enough, whatever they want to say. You can't let their ignorance define you. Because that's what it is. It's ignorance and jealousy. When you walk through the doors of your school, you should walk through every day and say, I am freaking amazing and I deserve to be here. Because guess what? You are. And you do deserve to be there. I'm of the full belief that we are always exactly where we're meant to be for a reason. You might be frustrated you didn't get a promotion, or you didn't get to school, or you didn't get wherever you wanted to be. And I have to constantly remind myself that's because in this moment in time, I'm the only one who can do what I'm about to do. And when you walk those doors, that's what you should own. Next year, they might hire somebody differently who does it better. But guess what? This year is your moment. Because you were placed in that space because no one can do what you are about to do. You might have wondered why you were here today. And even in this moment, I think there's probably somebody in this room who got up and they were like, I don't even know what I'm going to get out of this. I don't know why I'm going to this. I have so much to do. And maybe you were only here today for these next 30 seconds. Maybe the only reason you were placed in this room today is because you were meant to be in front of someone you've never met before, whose sole purpose of being here was to tell you you are worthy. You are loved. You are needed. Please come back tomorrow. And if that's the only thing you get out of this entire time together, in my eyes, it was worth every single second because so often we forget how amazing we are. And we need someone to grab us by the shoulders and shake us and say, don't lose your light. Because you bring something fantastic to the table, even if you've allowed others to steal that from you. I so hope you've gotten some value out of today. I've got a QR code. I have a weekly email list that I spend inspiration, resources, and ideas out to. So if you want to sign up for my free email list, that's there. Otherwise, thank you guys so much. If you need anything from me, that's my social media. My website is just toddnesloney.com. You can get any information you need. I respond to every message personally, so you will always hear back from me. But I know we also have this time if any questions as well. Otherwise, that's it. Okay, thank y'all so much.